Hi, my name is Tyler Ryan. I'm a senior manager here at JRBT. I was visiting with you guys a couple weeks ago on the PPP loans, and we thought it'd be a good time to do an update. As anyone who's been keeping up with the PPP loans knows, it's been a continuing evolution, this process of what forgiveness looks like and how to get there. So just wanted to do an update today on where we stand and what's changed since our last tax talk on PPP loans. I will give a brief disclaimer that you shouldn't substitute this, or this shouldn't be taken as tax advice. This is just informative. If you have any questions, please reach out to your JRBT tax consultant or whoever your contact is at JRBT, and if you don't have one, feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have. So I think where we want to start today is the timeline for forgiveness application. While it's still not a defined timeline, it's not like a tax return where there's a set date of when this thing has to be applied for. We do at least have a little bit more information on how long we have to apply for forgiveness. We've got a longer time period to apply for forgiveness before any payments are due. And so I guess taking a step back, I was getting ahead of myself there. One of the big changes that has happened is the covered period. When the PPP loan program began, there was an 8-week period to spend the loan. The 8-week period was what could be used to apply for forgiveness, and so that has now changed to 24-week period. For anyone who had a loan prior to June 5th, you have the option to choose between either the 8-week period or the 24-week period. And there's some analysis that can go into that depending on what head count looks like at the beginning of the year versus head count at the end of the 8-week period and the 24-week period. There are situations where one period could yield more forgiveness than the other if you weren't going to get forgiven the entire amount. Now, the good thing is you don't have to make the election at the end of the 8-week period. You've got until the end of the 24-week period, or actually further than that, to make the election. You can look back and choose whether the 8 or the 24-week period is better to use. And that's for anyone who received a loan before June 5th. After June 5th, you are required to use the 24-week period. So that was the big change. The second big change, and I was kind of getting ahead of myself there, was our timeline to apply for forgiveness. And so after with the new rules that have been put into place, the first payment on the loan is not due until 10 months from the end of your covered period. And so that would be that would be 10 months from either the 8-week period or the 24-week period. And that's if you don't apply for forgiveness before those 10 months are up. Once you apply for forgiveness, and this was something that we touched on in our last tax talk on PPP loans, is there's a 150-day window of a potential 150-day window of review that goes into this. And so the lender has 60 days to review your forgiveness application, and then the SBA has another 90 days to review that. But on top of that 150-day window, what has been said with the updated bill and the new rules that are in place is your first payment is not due until the SBA actually remits the SBA pays the lender back whatever the loan amount was. So I guess long way of saying there's 10 months before the first payment's due, 10 months from the end of the covered period, and then a potential, if you waited until the end of those 10 months to apply for forgiveness, there's potentially another 150 days. So I think the message is there's a little bit of relief that we've got a little more time to put these forgiveness applications together before having to make payments. So I think moving down, I've covered timeline for application. Oh, the other new development is a new EZ application. The SBA released two updated forgiveness applications last week. One is the full forgiveness application, which is it's very, very similar to the first forgiveness application, but most of the language is updated to account for the new 24-week covered period. The second of the new forgiveness applications is an EZ application. The EZ application is an abbreviated form with not as many calculations that have to go into it. Effectively what it does is it cuts out a lot of the full-time equivalent or FTE calculations. And so to be able to use the EZ application, there's 3 scenarios for borrowers that can use the EZ application. The first one is Schedule C filers. Any Schedule C filer that has no employees can file the EZ. And I'll stay on that for a second. What has come out with some of the IFRs that were released last week actually is Schedule C filers can elect to use the 24-week covered period, and effectively it guarantees forgiveness on a Schedule C filer with no employees. And I will be specific to that. If it's a sole proprietor, no employees, because your loan was effectively based on 9 weeks of data or 2.5 months of data from 2019, the 24-week period allows enough time for you to use those funds to get full forgiveness, or at least that's what the expectation is. And so again, that's the first scenario of a borrower being able to use the EZ application. The second scenario is a borrower who did not have any changes in FTEs from January 1st until the end of the covered period, the 8 weeks or the 24 weeks. So again, going back to what I said that really kind of changed in the EZ application is it cuts out a lot of the FTE formulas that you have to go through to see if you get full forgiveness of the loan. And in this scenario, if you can support that your FTEs on January 1st did not decrease from January 1st until the end of your covered period, then you can file the EZ application. The third scenario of a borrower being able to use the EZ application would be a borrower who did have an FTE reduction from January 1st to the end of the covered period, but they were unable to maintain the same level of business due to having to follow guidelines from either the CDC, and apologize, I'm reading here because the names are a little long, but the CDC, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, or the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. I do want to point out that the instructions are very specific to those 3 organizations, and at this point there's a lot of commentary out there that there were scenarios where maybe businesses had to shut down or significantly reduce their operations for a period of time based on either local and state rules or laws that were put into place. And so at this point, we're still kind of unsure on how to get there in that scenario, but I do want to point out the fact that the instructions are very specific, that those 3 governing bodies and their guidance are the ones that we have to use to support the reduction in full-time equivalents and still be able to use the EZ application. So what is the EZ application? When the forgiveness application came out, the original forgiveness application, the updated what I'll call the full application, it's an 11-page document, which includes instructions, but it's 11 pages to pick through both the old one and the new one. But the EZ, they've simplified it down to just a handful of pages, and the actual forgiveness application is only a 1-pager. And so it significantly cuts down the calculations that go into it. However, there still is a decent amount of support that has to be submitted with the forgiveness application, that we'll still have to submit documentation that supports expenses, non-payroll expenses, the FTEs on January 1st and the end of the covered period, along with payroll data. And so there still is a decent amount of documentation that has to go into these, but it has been scaled back some from the full application. The other topic that I wanted to talk about today, and kind of moving away from the actual application itself, and this is kind of specifically addressing some questions that we've seen here internally over the past week or two, is, given kind of the turbulent times that we're in, and seeing transactions of either companies selling or buying, what happens if we have one of these loans and you're going through a sales transaction? Unfortunately, that's a question that we don't have a lot of answers to right now, but specifically speaking to at least EIDL loans, in the actual loan documentation, it does say that you're required to get SBA approval to transfer that loan. And so the way that reads is the borrower is on the hook unless they get approval from the SBA to transfer that loan to whoever the buyer of the business is. We've reached out to the SBA and haven't been able to get clear answers just yet, but we do have some practical solutions on working through that if you are currently in one of those situations. And so I would encourage you to reach out to either myself or whoever your JRBT contact is to work with you through those situations, or any other questions with those, what would happen in a scenario such as that. So, I'll close it up at that. I think that the message today is that we're still keeping up with all the changes. It's still an evolving process and new information, every few days. And to the extent you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us here. We're here to offer consulting services to you, either in the form of reviewing your forgiveness applications or actually preparing the forgiveness applications for you. We will continue our tax talks here at JRBT weekly. If you weren't able to catch this live, you can access it through our JRBT webpage or Facebook. Thanks, and have a great day.